sounds strong.
Welcome to our podcast, When Life Gives You Lemons. I'm Kevin Henry, and my partner in crime in life is Palmi Henry. I have a rare disease known as spinal cell white ataxia, which is a neuromuscular disease. This has left me mobility challenges as well as with a speech impediment, noise-induced anxiety.
Living with these disabilities for over 20 years, we have developed helpful hints and life lessons that we would like to share with you that has made our life easier and possible in some cases. We consider ourselves disability advocates and intend to educate ourselves and you about other disabilities and issues, and also talk about things we find interesting and frequently encounter when we're out and about. Hey, this is the month of May. And what are we going to talk about?
Something about, may I? Oh, may I talk about service dogs?
Yes, that's what we're talking about, service dogs. So it is a very complicated subject because there's all kinds of things and different therapy dogs, emotional support dogs, all kinds of classifications. And it was way too complicated for us to get to learn all the ins and outs and all that stuff. So we went to experts.
Well, we tried to get experts to compare different states.
Right. We travel in 2 different states. Well, 2 or 3, but mainly 2. Missouri, which is where we're at, and Tennessee, which is where my brother is at and Kevin's parents are at. And so we tend to travel there quite frequently along with our dogs. So we wanted to get the clarification of make sure that we stay in legal.
Now, as a disclaimer, it's important that you check your state laws to find out if they've added any requirements we're not talking about, because there are 50 states.
And all states have separate clarifications on that. But they all follow the ADA rule.
Right. That means there are 47 states out there that we're not talking about that could have further legislated laws that apply.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but who are we talking to? We're talking to Stacy. She is an owner of Bush's Pet Store and kenneling, and also a doggy daycare here in our town. She's a friend of mine, and she was nice enough to be on the podcast. And then my mother-in-law, Ruth Henry, she knew of an expert, Christy, from Thunderhawk Canine in Tennessee, and she actually has taken some of her courses and said she's amazing as an instructor. Now, Stacy does not train service dogs. She's just sees the other end of it, where the service dogs and the therapy dogs and the emotional support dogs come into her place. But Christy would be the expert as far as service training in the Tennessee area. Now let me read to you, so we don't have any confusion. What the ADA says about service dogs.
And warning ahead of time, the ADA is kind of vague about some of the stuff and not really specific about other stuff.
Okay, according to the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, a service animal is defined as a dog that is individually trained to do work or perform tasks for a person with a disability. The ADA specifies that only dogs are recognized as service animals under Titles 2, 3, and of the Act. This means that while other animals can provide support, they are not considered service animals under the ADA guidelines. Service animals are trained to specifically perform tasks directly related to the person's disability, such as guiding people who are blind, alerting people who are deaf, and pulling a wheelchair or performing other duties. The work or tasks performed by a service animal must be directly related to the individual's disability. It's important to note that emotional support animals, therapy animals, and comfort animals or companion animals are not considered service animals under ADA because they have not been trained to perform a specific task or job. If you need more details, please visit the ADA official website. Kevin will have that below in the show notes. Now, excessive rights. No. Access rights. Service dogs are legally allowed to accompany their handlers in most public places, including restaurants, shops, and hotels. This is to ensure that the individual with the disability can participate in everyday activities. Differences from the emotional support animal. It's important to note that service animals are not the same as emotional support animals. Service dogs are trained to perform specific tasks, where an emotional support animal is not. So let's get on with all the experts telling us where exactly we stand.
Okay, that sounds like a great idea. First up,
hey, stay tuned for the end of the podcast for a chance at our 2024 podcast drawing. All right, now we'll hear from Christy from Thunderhawk Canine in Tennessee.
So this is Palmi and Kevin, and we have a special guest, Christy from Thunderhawk Canine. Hey, Christy, how are you?
Hey, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Doing fine. Hey,
Awesome.
we've contacted you today because we're doing a podcast on service dogs and the three other categories that that would help with a disabled person. So
Okay.
we're talking service dog, we're talking therapy dog, and we're talking emotional support dog.
Awesome. And those are the three major categories. And I think often people confuse what roles each of those have defined as.
Yes.
Yeah, but they're all vital. They just have very, very different properties.
So let's start with the service dog, which is the one that involves more of the training. And am I correct that you do train service dogs?
We do. Service dogs, like you said, they're dogs that are task-based trained, meaning they do specific jobs or tasks for their owner / handler to help them mitigate a diagnosed disability. Primarily, we do service dog training with their owners. There are some facilities that will take dogs in, do all the training themselves, and then match them. There's some really, really great reputable organizations. Unfortunately, in our industry right now, it's kind of a fad. And so there are a lot of people that are either think they're doing a great job and maybe don't have the whole picture. I think there's also, it's an area that's become quite taken advantage of. But we do offer it, like I said, in conjunction with their owners so that they can be part of the training process, especially since it's such a long duration.
And tell me, do you have a recent graduate that you trained for a specific diagnosis or disability?
Graduate, I can't think of anybody right off the top of my head. And that's sort of a hard thing anyway, because all training is an evolving process. And the dogs are always in training every time they are out with their person. But certainly we want to see a metric of they've accomplished this before they're going out into public. I do have a group that I meet with every week to bi-weekly of 4 to 5 service dog handlers that are bringing their dogs up. 2 members of our group are former veterans, one from Vietnam and then one from more recently, and their dogs are in training for PTSD type stuff, as well as indicated retrieve, mobility assistance, things like that. We have one who right now I'm working with his mom. The young child has a pretty significant disability that helps with mobility. So as well as some attention deficit issues and things like that. I have another woman in the group. She's on her second dog. She's training with us. And she has some significant anxiety disorders that present themselves in some self-destruction, not to the point of mutilation, but she'll like scratch lesions on herself and things like that. So her dog has some interruptive behaviors that have been trained. So those are just some examples.
So training is ongoing then, continually throughout the process then.
Yep.
Not like
I'm
not
sorry.
like blind CNI dogs where I think they graduate and then they go to the owner type of thing. Is that what? So
They
that's a little
do, but
different.
it is, but they still have trainers in the area where they go, or if they're local to the leader dog schools, they still meet for maintenance stuff.
Okay.
Because dogs, again, they're always learning and they're always going to do what benefits them, to be honest. And so if they get into their work and through the course of their work, they end up performing a behavior that maybe isn't part of the picture that we want to see, but that behavior is inadvertently rewarded. Maybe
Right.
they're just having a bad day and they have an ear infection, and they saw another dog and they were just a little more grumbly. But when they did that, the other dog backed away or alerted to them. Now that dog learned in that one moment that being a little bit grumbly can affect their environment. And
Right.
so then we need to go back and recondition that. You don't get to be grumbly and be a service dog.
Right.
So now, again, the hardest thing, hands down, with service dog work is the individual genetic temperament of the dog. You just can't train out genetics.
Right.
So it's a very, very, very small fraction of the canine population that is truly appropriate to service dog work. And so maybe grumbly wasn't the best idea. A service dog really should never be reactive to their environment, but that
But
was an
they're human.
example.
I mean, but they're dogs too. They
Mhm.
they go back to their basics.
To
So
some degree.
that leads me to a question on the cost. We've heard it's quite expensive. There's lots of grants out there in order for people to be able to afford this. I know the Veterans Home or House or Veterans Affairs here in Missouri offers a whole course on it, and financing for it because it's so expensive.
It is a continuing evolving process. And yeah, a finished dog, depending on what skill sets they're trained in, could be upwards of $25,000,
Wow.
which obviously is quite cost prohibitive for a lot of
Right.
people. I don't blame them. But part of that is because that temperament is so specific that you're either buying dogs out of a breeding program that has been putting out this specific temperament for decades and decades, or you are taking in a lot of dogs with the hopes that some of them will have that temperament, but you're spending the time raising them, training them, feeding them, interacting with them, and you can't make that judgment call until they're like 8 to 18 months. And
Wow.
so then when the dog isn't going to work out for that, then you're going to repurpose those dogs into hopefully other jobs or pet homes. So it is quite a costly process to get a dog to a finished place.
Wow.
There are all the grants available. And honestly, I have people that I refer people to help with that. And they range from, definitely helping people that might be economically compromised to people that maybe make a little bit too much to refund state, or excuse me, to receive state funds.
Right.
And so there's this gap actually for children. One of my clients is using that. It's a grant where her family makes too much, but not enough to be able to just drop $25,000 on a dog. And so they get upwards of, I think it's $10,000 a year to put towards needs for this child. So there's a lot of things out there that are available. There's also some people that are starting to look at this area of the industry that we call green dogs. And it's something that's been in law enforcement and military forever. Basically, it's dogs that have the correct temperament, have been raised up to a certain point. So we know that they are physically healthy, and they show like they're going to be able to do the work, but they're not trained to task yet. So they can then be molded to the individual person. And we're actually starting a puppy raising program along those lines here as well, just so
Wow.
that people have a better crop. There's
Right.
almost, I think one of the biggest challenges for my clients is that they'll get a puppy, they'll raise it up, they're attached, they're emotionally invested, they put so
Right.
much into it. And now the dog is 14 months old and clearly not an appropriate candidate. And
Right.
then what do? If you keep it as a pet, that's great. But then your new dog coming into the home has this built-in, competition for affection and everything else. It's a lot harder. Or you
Right.
have to place that dog, start all over, and you still might not know for a year if that dog's going to work. So
Right.
I think that's maybe a gap in the industry that people are trying to fill.
Heartbreaking. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, we were in that situation. We have two little dogs, and Kevin probably could really use a service dog. For he has a lot of anxiety and stuff like that. But we'd have to get rid of ours, and you're so attached. We've had ours for 7, 8 years, so it's hard to give up a dog like that.
I would say most of my clients that are working with me also have pets in the home. We just really work on developing that individual bond and that independence with their handler, independence from the other dogs in the home. There are
Right,
the organizations that require you to have no other pets in your home, and I
right.
understand that because they want to set their animals up for success. But we work with a lot of people that have other dogs in the home, so it can be done, especially if the primary purpose of that service dog for you is out in public. So
Mhm.
there's not that competition. It's just you and your dog. There's not that competition for interaction and things like that.
When you're outside the house, yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, tell us a little bit about your kennel, or is it a kennel? Canine kennel is what it's called?
Thunderhawk Canine is an evolving process as well. I should say, like my background is through clinical behavior out of out of a veterinary hospital in Michigan. My
Wow.
degree is animal behavior and neurobiology, and I started up in Michigan well, I graduated in 1999 and was working at the veterinary hospital at that time. I moved to Tennessee in 2008. My then boyfriend, now husband, had purchased Thunderhawk Kennels at the time in 2006. When he purchased it, it had actually been shut down as a business for many years. So he reopened it under Thunderhawk Canine. And when I moved to Tennessee again from Michigan, I had spoken at the Michigan Veterinary Conference. I did in services with veterinarians. I was something of a peer on the behavior side. And that was at the very, very early stages of the practice of clinical behavior or behavior out of a veterinary hospital. That was very early in it anyway.
Right,
So
right.
when I moved to Middle Tennessee, I just thought, oh my gosh, nobody's going to have my skill sets. I'm going to go to the vets, let them know I'm available, and I'll be able to just kind of make it here. But I did that, and maybe I was a little too full of my own bravado. But the feedback was that I talk way too fast for the South, and you're just a little girl. How are you going to handle those big dogs, honey?
I'm
And
from Michigan too. I'm from Michigan. Whereabouts in Michigan?
I grew up in Berkeley, which is Southfield, Royal Oak, a suburb
Oh
of
yeah, yeah.
Detroit. So I
Yep,
would
yep.
say
I lived
everybody
in
knows.
Dearborn.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
I always joke that everybody knows 8 Mile and I was at 11 Mile.
Yeah, we lived on 8 Mile. Yep. So,
Yeah,
but originally I'm from northern Michigan, and I had that same thing where I talk too fast.
and
So
talk over everybody. And
right, yeah.
it was also I think I was also involved with some law enforcement up there and stuff like that. And I just feel it was just a different place in viewing women's place in the industry
And it's
down
different
here
culture.
than up there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally different culture. Yeah, the
very
southern
true.
south is totally different from the northern states. So it
Yeah.
takes a little bit of getting used to, but we love them now. So
Absolutely. And I think honestly it was probably in my best interest anyway, to be honest,
right,
because then I had to develop my roots in the community. Instead of just going to the vets and trying to be the local professional, I started a 4-H dog program. We were a part of Bite Free Putnam County. I got involved with the local hospital because they were trying to create a therapy dog program, which we had already created up in Michigan. So I was able to really contribute to the community that I wanted to be giving me business. And then
right.
those people went back to the veterinarians, and now things are very cohesive
Well,
in
and
this
you're right.
area.
You obviously have more than you can handle. So you're very
Yes,
busy all
and
the
I'm
time.
sorry. I am.
Our
I
gar-
run in
my
way too many directions.
Yeah, my mother-in-law just loves the training that she gets there. That's our connection to you.
Mm.
And so we are curious: is there different requirements in different states? We are talking about Michigan versus Tennessee, but service-wise and emotional, or is it just a common? It's very confusing for a lot of
It is.
people when you first get into it because there's what's required and what's not required, and you can't literally ask if the dog is trained properly. So that's
Correct,
completely,
correct. So my
yeah.
basic overview is that, we have those three main designations that you mentioned. We have therapy dogs. Therapy dogs are somebody's pet, who is trained to a high level of degree, and then they've also had their temperament tested to say that this dog genuinely enjoys the interactions with other people. And then when those dogs are working, they are everybody's dog. And they do, again, go through that evaluation process. They are generally certified by an organization. We work with a couple different ones, and that organization kind of backs their volunteers, usually with upwards of a $1 million liability policy.
Well,
And they
okay.
do not have any legal access rights. You can't take your therapy dog anywhere that pets are not invited, unless it's very specifically requested by the administration there. And even then, it's subject to federal law. So, like a restaurant owner couldn't say, hey, I want to have a therapy dog visit here. You can't do that. There also is this new subsection of therapy dogs. They're commonly called facility dogs. These are dogs that live within the facility or are owned by somebody that works within the facility. So schools, therapists, we've trained some for local dentist offices. And they do kind of the same thing. They're there to comfort the humans that are there. They are not typically covered by any of these third-party organizations. They are under the liability of that company.
Person. Oh,
Yeah, or that person, probably both. And we usually recommend that there's a separate liability policy just for that dog. But even in every case, those dogs are, like I said, they're everybody's dogs. Then there's the emotional support area. Emotional support dogs are covered by the Free Housing Act. That's where all their laws are at, or at least a large portion of them. They only have legal access rights for housing and transportation, and it can be state dependent. So more and more municipalities are passing legislation about it, and then they kind of get fought through the Fair Housing Act, and it kind of goes back and forth. And a lot of that is because there's so much abuse in that area.
right.
An emotional support animal requires a medical documentation saying that the human needs this animal in their life. It makes no stipulations on the training of the dog, the type of the dog, anything. It just says the human benefits from having it and therefore should have it in housing and transportation situations. And that's why you can go online and you can speak to a therapist for 15 minutes, and then they can give you that letter that you need to take to your landlord or whatnot. So there's a lot of back and forth on that one. And I just tell people, go ahead.
Is that typically like those things you see online or YouTube or whatever, where they offer certification, and that's all it's really doing is giving you you're having an interview with a doctor, psychiatrist, whatever. It's just not a thorough background, evaluation or anything. It's just a fee,
usually. Yeah, not usually. Now I work with plenty of clients who are in therapy and they would benefit or do benefit from it, and they do get a letter from their practitioner. So there's a lot of truth in that part of the industry, but there's just so much scam. And all you have to do is spend 5 minutes on a local Facebook page, and somebody will say, hey, how do I keep my dog in my apartment? It's not pet friendly, and my landlord just found out. And there's 27 comments that say, oh, just go get yourself this.
Right.
To call it a certified emotional support dog, I mean, again, the laws make absolutely no demands nor requirements or anything else for the training on the dog or anything about the dog. So it just, that letter just says there is a need by the human. And then the little loophole that I suppose landlords have and whatnot is that any dog, no matter what job they are performing, if they create a disturbance, if they are not unobtrusive, then they can be asked to be removed unless they are in the act of tasking. So then that brings us to service dogs. Service dogs are, handler specific. They should be very attentive to their one person. They must complete a task or multiple tasks that help that person with a diagnosed disability mitigate life. It is true that all a business owner or anyone can do is say, is your dog a service dog? And what tasks does your dog provide? They cannot ask for a demonstration of task or anything else. So there is a lot of dishonesty in that aspect of it as well.
Right.
But from a law standpoint, that is protected by the Americans with Disability Act. There's no certification, registration, anything that the ADA cares about, any of that stuff that you find online, I'm not going to call it a scam, because there are some organizations that are just trying to create a minimum standard so people can say my dog is past this minimum standard. And if, business owners or anybody was aware of that, then they could say, okay, this dog, has a public access or accessibility, certification. The law doesn't care, but it should give owners of businesses and whatnot some information. The problem is that for every legitimate one of those that exists, there's 40 that are not legitimate. So business owners can't weed through to know what's good and what's bad. Yeah, it's a real hard gray area. The one subsection of service dog training that is very state dependent is service dogs in training.
Right.
The ADA does not make any mention of service dogs in training. They offer no rights or anything like that, but states do. So for instance, in the state of Tennessee, a service dog in training is only granted public access if it is accompanied by an accredited trainer or a trainer from an accredited establishment. And that's because they were going to put a leader dog school in Nashville. That didn't happen. And so there really isn't an accredited training program in the state of Tennessee. There are other states that grant service dogs in training full legal access rights, which I think is a little bit crazy. So that is an area where everybody has to research.
Right. That should be something they earn eventually. Yeah.
I feel like, I can take a puppy and say it's a service dog in training because it is until it fails out or is, finished.
Which you got a good 18 months, apparently.
Yeah. Or
do you find that there's a particular breed or I guess size that's typical for a service dog?
I think it depends on the needs of the person, but I do think that the breeds that have been, again, bred in that direction for decades are where people should really be looking. And that's our Goldens, our Labs, and not our field Goldens, our field Labs, much more our bench dogs, our calmer. Yeah, in general, calmer, more attentive.
And more trainable, apparently. Yeah.
To that task. A lot of people want to be a little bit different often. And so they'll get these off breeds. And that's not to say that a Belgian Malinois individual might not make a great service dog, but in general, that is not what the breed was created for the last, 100 years. And so trying to take that very intelligent, very active dog and then mold it into something very specific and calm and attentive, it can be very hard on the dog.
They tend to not fail out of the course. When you put that much money in it, you want your best to choose the best choice to begin with, I assume.
I think so. And what ends up happening is a lot of people, I think, take dogs that are not truly meant for the work and just do it anyway. And so we see that with a lot of the off breeds. It just, I can't even, for me, like a husky is happiest, strapped to a sled and running across Alaska. Not to say that you can't keep them fulfilled in a million different ways. And there are some individuals within the husky breed that make great service dogs, but they are a very, very small percentage. So yeah, if you're going to go out and get a dog because you want to raise a future service dog, it's always best to set yourself up for the most success possible and go with something a little more traditional.
Right. Well, thank you. I appreciate your time, Kristen.
Absolutely.
Christy. And our podcast will come out on either Wednesday or Thursday, right?
It'll come out usually on Wednesday unless I have a tough nut to crack in editing.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys today. And if you can send me a link to that, I'd love to have it, and I'll get it circulated as well.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you. You guys have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow. We really learned a lot of stuff there. I think we knew a lot more about service animals than we did before.
Okay, so this is Stacy Heiser, and she owns Bush's Pet Products here in Cape Girardeau. And we're going to talk to Stacy today about service animals. we're investigating how to get a service animal, what you need to do, and all the details. And I've known her in the past. She's a friend of mine from before when I had the cafe. And I'm hoping she will give us some information.
Hopefully so.
Hi, Stacy. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. I'm Stacy Heiser, Stacy Bush. Everybody knows me as different things. I do, like Palmi said, own Bush Pet Products, which is a holistic pet supply store. It's been open since 2010. I also own Deer Creek Doggy Day Camp, which we opened in 2015. That's just a daytime daycare for dogs. And I actually took over my parents' kennel, boarding kennel, in 2019. It's called Bush's Kennel. And we board dogs and cats overnight there. And that's actually been in operation since 1972.
So you just have all kinds of spare
all
time.
kinds.
Plus she has a child who's 13, so she's also a mother.
Yes.
How do you do all that?
Barely.
Well, like I said, we were going to talk about service animals, and we kind of talked last night about we needed some basic information on service animals.
Sure.
So what is the difference between a service animal and an emotional support animal?
Well, there's some pretty vast differences. In fact, I even kind of categorize them in more like 3 categories than 2, because there are therapy dogs, therapy animals as well. Those are more like the dogs that you see that go into nursing homes, and some that you see at schools. They're becoming more and more popular in classroom settings.
I thought you were saying like because I know there's a psychiatric type of dog service.
Yeah,
Is that,
and I would probably
put that in the same area?
Yeah, they might cross over just a hair into the ESA. It kind of depends on what kind of training they have. And what the business or organization allows too.
Right.
You know, I think therapy animals were super duper popular before COVID, because we had a lot of them that would come in and get new collars for different holidays and things like that, because they were going to visit nursing homes and they were going to visit assisted living centers, and and there's several schools in the area that have dogs that spend their days in classrooms with kids that have like anxiety. And, you know, so it's more like those dogs can be petted, they can be hugged, they're just there for
comfort.
For comfort, yeah. So that's kind of the first category. The emotional support animals, you know, they're not necessarily trained either. In a lot of cases, it's just the bond that they provide to their owner. ESA animals can travel on planes. They can go into certain establishments that allow ESA.
Not the same as service, then?
Not the same as service. Okay. No, not at all. They definitely have not gone through a specialized training program. In my opinion, I'm sure there are training programs out there. In fact, I do know of a few. But
well, there's a question about certification of even service animals.
Right. I mean, and it's very murky. In the United States, there's some states that are very strict about it, and some just are. It's the Wild West. So it's kind of unfortunate, because it does hinder what's really going on with a true service animal, in my opinion. But
it confuses people too.
It does confuse people, and it also brings out the worst in some people too, trying to get by with things.
You mean trying to get their dog in somewhere where they shouldn't be?
Yeah.
So I mean, they don't have that training to be around the public and stuff, right?
Right, yeah. So it's kind of difficult. I mean, I think that emotional support animals have their place for sure to help with people that have fear of certain things, severe anxiety. I mean, I think fear of flying is probably the biggest one that you know about, you know, just from past experiences. But people are, again, stretching that a little bit. Whereas like a true service dog has gone through extensive amounts of training. And
it's expensive.
It's expensive. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars for some of these dogs. One of my customers who has a true service dog for her son, they had to get a grant, and as I recall, he was $40,000. You know, but he was raised from birth. I mean, he was from a breeding facility that does that. That's exactly So there's a place for all of them.
Right.
But when like I said, when the waters get kind of murky.
And there's some laws with the ADA where you can't ask, right?
Yes, there are. In fact, I went back and I looked that up because I wanted to make sure. But yeah, under the ADA, you cannot ask a person about their disability or demand to see any certification or proof other than asking about the animal's training that's all you can really say.
You can just ask him how he was trained.
Yeah, what he's trained
what
for.
He's for. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
what he's
then you
trained
kind of get what the dog's doing for him then.
Yeah,
I guess.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you provide that type of training?
No, I don't. I do have some resources which I can either give to you now or later,
I'll put them on the bottom.
some of the in the local area. Of course, there's all kinds of national organizations too. You do have to kind of sift through those just a little bit too.
Right.
If you're just using Google for everything,
I got stuck somewhere. I actually asked about service dogs, and I suddenly got all this junk coming to me. Please certify your dog.
Yes,
we'll send you a vest, and and I was thinking, where's the training? They just want to send you a vest and charge you $95.
Yeah, and there are a lot of websites that will. You pay the money, you get the certificate, and a lot of places accept that. And that's where I have
because of lack of information, or you think, or not wanting to rock the boat.
I think it's lack of there being guidelines and there being laws for that.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like you said, Wild West.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, I will provide those that referrals from that you give me onto the bottom of the podcast.
Excellent.
So they'll some people can go there. And so we kind of got into this the other night. We talked about your business.
Mm-hmm.
It is a pet store.
Yeah.
So pets come in. I see dogs and cats all the time when I come in.
Yeah.
And I brought my dog in a couple of times.
Yeah.
Mine's it's the one that's not so public. He would not pass his obedience class because he doesn't like people.
Yeah, it happens.
He can do everything else, but he just does not like people. But so have you seen some issues?
Yeah, I will say in this location, which we've been in for, I guess, 3 years now, it's been better.
And why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know if people are just getting better at it. I don't mean that in a bad way, but
I think COVID had something to do with that.
I have to wonder because we did move right after COVID, so maybe. But at my old location, there were a few times that I had questions.
Fights or dog fights?
No dog fights. We had one person come in who claimed to be a dog trainer, whose dog actually peed in 3 different spots in my store, and I'm like,
well, the basic training is potty training.
We kind of had some pretty,
3 times. How did he get 3 times out of there?
He just went over and lifted his leg. He was marking. Yeah, he was. Which a trained dog would not do that.
Yeah.
I had another customer come in with a dog for a bath, and I had questions because he was very old and very, for lack of a better way of saying it, broken down. And I'm like, how could he do service work?
Right.
Or at that time it was probably more emotional
wasn't anything
support.
that he did to cause problems, though. You just were worried that.
Yeah, I just had concerns.
Oh,
that maybe
because you did give discounts, right?
We did. Yeah,
okay.
We do. Yeah, because we do give a $5 bath for like active military dogs, active canine officers, and they get free baths. Our local, like the police,
right?
But military dogs and service animals get a $5 wash instead of their regular $15. So I had suspicions.
So it was a couponer.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of afraid of. I mean, you can kind of tell, and especially after we have three service dogs who come in. True service dogs.
Right.
We have the one that I told you about that they got the grant for their son, and he is a wonderful dog. When he's in here, he's off duty, so he can be petted.
Right.
But if he were to come in with his owner, he would be wearing his vest and he would be on the clock, so to speak.
Right.
And then we have a dog who comes in who is a PTSD dog, and she got him through an organization because she was active military. She saw a lot of combat.
Well, the VA actually has a program for service dogs.
Wonderful. So,
we haven't looked into it because we would have to get rid of our 2.
And that's it's hard.
Yeah. It is. And Kevin's very attached to the 2 we have.
Sure.
So.
I mean, you don't want to get rid of those.
Even though they're not emotionally supportive dogs.
They're not very supportive.
Well, no, they're very supportive, but they're not certified or anything. Right. I mean, not trained or anything.
No.
They do. He has terrible anxiety.
Sure.
And so loud noises, that type of thing.
Yes.
And so the dog will just pop up on his lap, and you
can
can see, and the other one follows him around in his wheelchair. So, even to the bathroom.
Right. Well, our third dog is a new dog, and this owner lost her vision.
So an actual blind.
And she flew out to California, trained with this dog for several weeks, and then they flew back, and she lives with her in like an assisted living type facility. The Schultz School, they used to be my 7th grade when I was a little kid. They converted it into specialized housing, and so the dog lives with her.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and
when we owned the cafe, the blind school was just down.
Yeah.
They would come for lunch. And
yes,
it was a practice session where they would come in and
practice.
And
get used
order
to
and stuff like that. I even got Braille menus for
That's
it.
awesome.
So there was quite a few of them.
Yeah,
so.
It's very neat to see. I mean, she comes in the dog comes in her vest, and she's got the handle on it, but they're okay if we pet her.
Right. Yeah.
Just kind of
it's hard to resist sometimes.
It is hard.
Especially when they're adorable. But you definitely don't want to cross that line.
No, for sure.
Because it confuses the dog.
It does for sure. And like in the case of the first dog, when he's wearing his vest, it'll say "do not pet," and so most people are pretty. But I've seen people.
Yeah, I've seen. Yeah, especially children, and then parents are like justifying why they let the child touch the dog. Which is.
But it'd be a perfect opportunity for a learning.
Right.
A learning thing for your child too.
That's what Kevin has. The chair is very attractive to all children.
Oh, I bet.
And so he always makes sure he does a learning session. Because the parents will don't. Stay away.
Right.
Well, it's fine.
Sure.
Kevin doesn't want. He's not contagious.
Right. He doesn't want people to be afraid.
Right. He doesn't want kids to be afraid.
Right. For sure.
And so he'll say, "Come on over. Do you want to work the the levers and and stuff like that?"
I like that.
So
I like that.
Yeah,
that's what it should be.
Because kids don't know. I mean, they only learn by learning.
They do. They do.
You said you don't do the service training, but you have a lot of background in training. What type of dog is breed, size, etc. is good for a service dog, do you think?
Well, for a true service dog, a lot of times you see Labradors and Golden Retrievers. Right. And I think that's because they have a good personality and they're very easily trained. They are very food motivated, which always makes training a lot easier. I know one of the organizations that we know over in Illinois, she breeds specifically labs, British labs, as I recall. And she picks, she's very, very strict with her bloodlines, and really starts training these puppies from almost birth. There's like a military program that they kind of start out. It's with noises and sounds, so these puppies can start getting acclimated to things. And then they actually, take applications for these for these animals, I should say, not pets, and people come in and train with them.
Yeah, I think I saw a documentary where they actually choose to follow a person from the beginning of the puppy all the way up to when they graduate.
Yeah.
It's on YouTube maybe or something.
Yeah, that's really neat.
Yeah.
But I think for like emotional support animals and even some therapy dogs, I think emotional support could be anyone that gives.
And typically smaller, wouldn't you think?
I think so in a lot of cases.
Because they can get up on and stuff like that.
Because they can.
What's a good small breed like that?
Oh gosh, I mean anymore. Of course, there's a lot of I say oodles of doodles out there.
Yeah,
lots and lots
all
of
different
doodles.
sizes too.
All
now.
different sizes.
Yeah.
I think the little Cavalier King Charles Spaniels are very sweet because all they want is to just be in your lap.
Right.
I think a lot of poodles, are great for that. It does kind of depend on how young you get the dog
and personality.
Yeah, for sure.
Some just don't have it.
They just don't have it. They're too busy.
Good
they're
animals,
too active.
but just not meant for that.
Yeah, and I don't think that a shelter dog should be ruled out.
That'd be great.
The only problem I run into with shelter dogs, and this isn't a problem because it's not anything that they've done, is what their background might be.
Right.
Did they come from an abuse situation or a neglect situation?
Early enough, maybe you didn't bypass all that.
Yeah, for sure, because they become very bonded with their owners.
That was my final question. Should you start with a puppy?
Yes,
it sounds like we should, but
in most cases,
for service animals, for sure.
I think so.
And then emotional animals, they kind of, fall in the gaps. And therapy dogs even better. I mean, you kind of figure out what the personality of the dog is, and then you know whether he's good or not.
Exactly. Yeah, and I do know a lot of therapy dogs that were shelter animals to begin with. So I think that once they understand that they've found a safe place, then they really excel.
Right.
And really are thankful for their situation too.
Yeah. We have our bigger one, Sasha. She is a Pomeranian Chihuahua mix. Mm-hmm. And she was in a terrible situation and was rescued. that little dog is so grateful for
Isn't it
any
amazing?
love that you give her. And for God's sakes, don't leave any food around because
Well, yeah.
she's always starving, even though she's overweight.
Right,
so.
right. But, that's stuff that they've carried, that's trauma that they've carried with
Right.
them.
Well, she spent almost 3 months in a crate that she would not get out of.
See,
She was
that's so
traumatized.
sad.
Yeah.
It's so sad what people do to animals.
Oh,
but-
it's awful. I can't.
Yeah.
Don't get me started.
I know. That's a whole podcast.
Yes, that's a whole death sentence for me.
Yes.
So, well, thank you very much. I appreciate your
Yes,
time.
thank you for thinking
and
of
it's
me.
good talking to you again.
Yeah.
I haven't seen you. I mean, I've seen you, but I haven't talked in a while.
I know. It has been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Well, thank you, Stacy, for that interview. We learned a lot more about the consequences of having a service animal or emotional support or a therapy. Those seem more obtainable than the service dog, but with not so many access for your dog to go with you. Guys, we want to talk about our drawing that we're having at the end of the season. What you'll need to do to put your entry in is go to our website. We have a spot there where it says buy me a cup of coffee. It is a $3 donation that goes towards our equipment.
Basically, our needs. We need to update some equipment, update some subscriptions, etc.
So it kind of helps us out. We do appreciate any donations that you do. Go ahead and buy us a cup of coffee. Your entry will be that purchase. And at the end of the season, we will be drawing from those purchases a name and they will receive an original artwork from Deanna Ives. She's an artist in Maine, and there's no cost to you after the purchase of the cup of coffee. Good luck. Enter many, many times.
We'll see you next time.
Bye now. We are always looking to improve the podcast, so if you want to hear a specific topic, have a differing opinion, want to add something to the conversation, drop us an email. Our contact information is listed on our website. It's www.whenlifegivesyoulemons.net. We have recently added a companion YouTube channel called Making the Lemonade. If you enjoy the podcast, continue your enjoyment by joining us on YouTube.